Welcome to the Thinking Abyss podcast, a philosophical journey through consciousness, reality, and the phenomena that challenge our understanding of existence. From ancient wisdom to cutting-edge theories, we explore where philosophy meets science and curiosity leads to the edge of the unknown.
Language. I mean, we use it constantly, right?
Yeah.
To do everything from, ordering a coffee to debating philosophy.
It's the absolute foundation of shared knowledge. It's how we build societies, how we pass down science. We use words to describe, everything we can see and feel and think.
And yet, that's the central paradox we're exploring today, based on the sources you and I have been looking at. Despite all that incredible power, language just seems to be full of these unavoidable limits.
Exactly. We can describe the color red, we can write poems about heartbreak, but are there truths? Are there, deep personal experiences that just actively resist being captured by words?
That's precisely the question. We're going to be taking a really thorough look into those boundaries of communication, the exact point where words just seem to fail.
Right, and the goal isn't just abstract philosophy. It's about how these limits really shape your everyday life, your relationships, how knowledge actually gets transferred, or more often fails to be.
The research makes it so clear. Understanding what language can't do is just as important as knowing what it can.
Maybe even more revealing.
Okay, so let's start with this core idea, this huge barrier. It's what philosophers call the problem of subjective experience.
The technical term you'll see is qualia. It's basically the internal felt quality of an experience, the what it's like-ness of something.
And it's a really important distinction to make right away. Language is fantastic at transmitting objective information, right? Facts, logic, data.
Oh, absolutely. I can tell you the formula for the area of a circle, and you have that knowledge. It's transferred perfectly. But the minute we shift to the inner feeling of an experience, our whole system of shared symbols just starts to buckle.
So to make this really concrete, let's use the classic thought experiment that comes up in all the source material. Mary, the color scientist.
This is a great one. So imagine Mary. She's a brilliant neuroscientist, top of her field. But her entire life, she has lived in a specially designed black and white room.
Everything is black, white, or shades of gray. The books, the computer screen, her clothes, everything.
But here's the crucial part. She is the world's leading expert on the science of color. She knows every single physical fact.
So she knows the wavelength of light for every color, the neurochemistry of how our eyes perceive them.
Of firing patterns in the visual cortex, all of it.
Yeah.
If you can write it down in a textbook or a scientific paper, she knows it. She has 100% of the objective, factual knowledge about, say, the color red.
But she's never actually seen it.
Never. And then one day, the experiment is over, she's released from the room, and someone hands her a bright, vibrant red apple.
And the big question is, does she learn anything new?
And intuitively, we all know the answer is a huge, resounding yes.
Of course. She learns what red looks like. She learns the actual feeling, the experience of redness.
And that new knowledge, that immediate, private, inner feeling, that is a quail. And it's precisely the kind of knowledge that no amount of factual linguistic information could ever convey. She learns something non-linguistic.
But hold on, let me push back on that for a second. Couldn't you get close with really good language? Like with poetry or a powerful metaphor?
That's a great question.
Couldn't I say, red is like the sound of a trumpet. It's warm and sharp. It feels like the memory of fire. Isn't that transferring some of that knowledge?
It's an excellent challenge, and it really gets to the core of the problem. Metaphor is what we're forced to use, but it doesn't actually transfer the experience. It works as a proxy.
A proxy, what do you mean?
It prompts the listener to find a similar feeling in their own internal archive of experiences. If you've seen red, you hear sound of a trumpet, and you can kind of map that feeling onto your memory of red. You go, yes, I see that comparison.
But for Mary, who has never seen red, that archive is empty. The words trumpet and fire are just more objective facts for her. She can't construct the actual feeling from those pieces.
Precisely. The metaphor only works if the experience is already shared. For Mary, seeing that apple is still a completely new piece of information that exists in a realm language can only gesture towards.
So the gap isn't just that we don't have the right words, it's a fundamental mismatch.
Language is for public, shared concepts. Qualia are private internal states.
Exactly. It's the unbridgeable gap between knowing about and knowing through experience. And this isn't just about weird thought experiments. It applies to very real, very intense human experiences.
Yeah, let's take this from abstract color to something much more visceral, like pain.
Everyone has felt pain, but the inner quality of it is so intensely private. And we use language to try to bridge that gap all the time, especially in medicine. And the failure point is, well, it's obvious.
Right. A doctor can describe pain in perfect objective detail.
They can tell you it's the activation of nociceptors, the release of certain neurotransmitters. You can even see specific parts of the brain, like the anterior cingulate cortex light up on an fMRI scan. That's all hard data. Language handles that perfectly.
Yeah.
But I've known people who suffer from, say, cluster headaches or severe chronic nerve pain. And you can describe all the nerve pathways you want, but none of that captures what it feels like to have that unique, blinding agony inside your own head.
And the sources really emphasize this isn't just an academic debate, it's a real problem in healthcare. Think about the pain scale. Rate your pain from 1 to 10.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It's a purely linguistic tool trying to quantify something that's totally unquantifiable.
Exactly. My 10, maybe from a bad sprain, is completely different from the 10 of someone who lives with debilitating arthritis every single day. We're using the same word, the same number, but the internal reality it points to is it's just in a different universe.
So someone who's never had a migraine, for instance, can hear you describe it. The light sensitivity, the nausea, the pulsing, they can sympathize, but they can't actually know that specific phenomenal experience.
They can't. And you could write a 1,000-page book detailing every physiological aspect of a broken leg, the tearing of the muscle, the shock to the nerves. A person who reads that book but has never broken a bone still doesn't know the pain.
It's not a failure of detail then. It's a failure of the medium itself.
It's a failure of the medium. Language works by generalizing. Qualia are, by their nature, specific and irreducible. And when you try to cram that irreducible three-dimensional experience into the one-dimensional linear tool of language, something essential is always, always lost in the translation.
So if language already struggles with something as basic as pain or color, what happens when it's faced with something that's designed to create a visceral feeling, like art?
Well, that's where words almost voluntarily give up. Art, as the sources put it, provides eloquent testimony to the limits of language because it's working on a completely different channel. It bypasses the need for straightforward factual content.
Let's use the example from the research standing in front of a huge Mark Rothko painting.
Right. If you've ever seen one in person, they're enormous. Just these massive canvases with maybe 2 or 3 big floating fields of color.
And the experience isn't intellectual at first. It's this immediate gut-level emotional reaction. It might be a feeling of immense quiet or deep sadness, or maybe even something transcendent.
And of course, art critics have written millions of words trying to explain and capture the meaning of those paintings.
They'll talk about the historical context, the artist's intentions, the psychology of color.
But there's always something left over, isn't there? The words describe the components, the history, the technique, but they can't reproduce that visceral, instantaneous feeling of standing there and letting those color fields just wash over you.
It's almost like the more words you use, the further you get from the actual experience. You're just building a linguistic scaffold around something that wasn't meant to be verbal.
Exactly. The knowledge is in the viewing, not in the reading, which brings up that great quote from Wittgenstein that the research mentioned.
Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent.
Yes. It's this powerful call for intellectual humility. It suggests that when you reach the edge, when you're talking about the most profound or transcendent experiences, maybe silence is the most honest and accurate response. Trying to narrate it can actually diminish it.
That idea that silence can be more truthful than speech is perfectly illustrated by music. The source is called the ultimate form of non-semantic communication.
Think about a piece of music. It could be a complex Bach fugue or just a simple folk melody. It communicates so much emotion, tension, resolution, story, but it does it almost entirely outside of grammar and vocabulary.
We can still analyze it with language, of course. We can talk about the key signature, the tempo, the chord progression, the mathematical structure.
We can, but none of that analysis is the experience. None of it is the feeling of getting goosebumps when the harmony resolves, or the way a certain melody can just instantly trigger a childhood memory you'd completely forgotten about.
Right. If I try to explain why that specific chord change made me feel both sad and hopeful at the same time, I'm stuck. I just have to say, I don't know, it just did.
And that's where the distortion happens. The musical experience is multidimensional. It's auditory, it's emotional, it's tapping into memory. It might even be physical. You feel it in your chest all at once.
But language is sequential. It's one-dimensional.
Yes. And when you try to translate that rich, simultaneous experience into a linear string of words, the meaning just collapses. You're forced to flatten it out.
This challenge of translation is a perfect bridge to the next area: cultural limits. If it's hard to translate an experience from music into words for one person, imagine trying to bridge entire conceptual worlds between languages.
Every language carves up reality in a slightly different way. It's a toolkit that a culture develops to pay attention to what's important to them.
We all know the famous, maybe slightly mythologized example of Inuit words for snow.
Right. And whether it's 50 words or 5 doesn't really matter. The principle is what's important, that different languages equip their speakers to notice different things about the world. English might have one word, snow, where another language has specific words for wet snow, powdery snow, snow that's good for building.
It creates different architectures for reality. And the problem gets really intense when you have concepts that are so deeply woven into one culture that they just don't have a direct equivalent anywhere else.
These untranslatable words are fascinating. They aren't just vocabulary gaps. They represent, entire conceptual frameworks that are missing elsewhere.
Well, let's talk about some of the specific examples from the research, like the German word Sehnsucht.
Sehnsucht. It's often translated as longing or yearning, but that just doesn't cut it. It's so much deeper. It's this profound, almost spiritual ache for something you can't name or for something you know you can never have.
Like a lost home or a perfect future that's impossible. It has this whole philosophical weight to it.
Exactly. And to explain it in English, I have to give you that whole paragraph. I have to talk about German Romanticism and the sublime. A native German speaker feels the weight of all of that in a single word. The translation loses all of that emotional resonance.
It becomes an intellectual exercise instead of an immediate feeling.
Right. And we see a similar thing with the Japanese concept of mono no aware.
Which is what exactly?
It's often defined as a gentle, bittersweet awareness of the transience of things, the beauty of things, because they are fleeting.
So like the feeling you get watching cherry blossoms fall.
That's the classic example. It's not just sadness that they're gone. It's a deep appreciation mixed with that sadness. It's an entire emotional, philosophical stance that's very central to Japanese aesthetics. Again, in English, we have to staple together 5 or 6 different concepts to even get close.
It comes back to that Wittgenstein idea, doesn't it? The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. Translation isn't just swapping words. It's trying to build a bridge between 2 completely different ways of seeing.
And sometimes the barrier isn't just one word, it's the entire context that gives an experience its meaning.
Like the example of fasting during Ramadan.
Yes, we can describe the physical act perfectly in English. You abstain from food and drink from dawn till sunset. That's a factual linguistic description.
But it completely misses the point. It fails to translate the meaning of that experience for a believer.
For them, that hunger and thirst isn't just a negative physical sensation. It's tied up in spiritual discipline, community, a connection to tradition, an act of faith. That physical feeling is transformed by its context.
So you can't separate the physical description from the cultural and spiritual meaning without losing the essence of the experience.
You can't. Language can give you the skeleton, the bare facts, but the soul of the experience, the living part, exists in that shared non-linguistic context. And you can't just ship that across the language barrier in a dictionary.
That realization that context is everything brings us to a really strange place, the problem of self-knowledge. You'd think if there's one thing we can describe, it should be our own minds. We have direct access 24/7.
And yet it's this huge paradox. We are the ultimate insider, but we're often terrible reporters of our own internal state. How often have you heard someone say or said yourself, "I don't know why I'm so angry"?
All the time. Or trying to explain a really complex, mixed feeling. Like you might love a parent deeply, but also feel some resentment and gratitude and maybe even pity all at the same time.
Exactly. Internally, those feelings can coexist. It feels like a coherent, if messy, whole. But the second you try to articulate it, language forces you to put them in a line. You have to say one thing and then the next, and it doesn't fit.
It breaks the feeling apart.
It does. And psychological research actually has a name for what happens next. Confabulation.
Confabulation.
It's fascinating. When someone asks you why you feel a certain way, there's this immense social pressure to provide a coherent verbal reason.
But the real reason, the mix of hormones, unconscious associations, past experiences, that's all happening way below the level of language.
Precisely. So our brains, to satisfy the need for a linguistic explanation, just invent one. Unconsciously, we create a plausible story that sounds logical and fits the facts, even if it has no connection to the real, nonverbal cause of the emotion.
So we're essentially making up stories to explain ourselves to ourselves.
And to others. Not maliciously. It's because the structure of language demands a cause and effect narrative that our nonverbal brain often just doesn't provide.
That's incredible. It almost means that the person who says, I don't know, it's complicated, is being more honest than the person who gives a quick, neat explanation.
In many cases, yes. The struggle itself is the honest part. It's acknowledging what some call the evolutionary gap. Our emotional systems are ancient. They evolved long before abstract, symbolic language. Language is this new software running on old hardware, and the mapping is never clean.
And this internal struggle just spills out into our communication with other people. The research calls it the context dependency problem.
Right. Language relies on general, abstract words, but our lived experience is always specific, unique, and drenched in personal context.
Let's use the word home. On the surface, we all know what it means. A building, a place you live.
But the internal emotional resonance of that word is completely different for everyone, based on thousands of non-linguistic memories. For one person, home might mean safety, warmth, unconditional love.
For someone else who grew up in a chaotic or abusive environment, the exact same word, home, could be weighted with anxiety, trauma, and a feeling of danger.
Or for an immigrant, that word is layered with loss, nostalgia, a longing for a place that doesn't exist anymore in the same way.
So we use these big emotionally charged words like love or loss or failure, and we operate on this pretense of a shared meaning. But underneath that surface, the internal reality that word connects to is radically different for you and for me.
And that gap becomes a huge chasm when we talk about something like trauma. This is the ultimate stress test for language.
A trauma survivor can describe the events. They can give you the sequence of what happened. That's the factual part language can handle.
But the trauma isn't the event itself. The trauma is the way the event fundamentally rewires a person's nervous system. It changes their sense of safety, their relationship with time, their ability to trust. It's a complete restructuring of their inner world.
And that restructuring, that can't be conveyed just with words.
It can't. A listener can understand the horrible facts of what happened, but they can't feel the altered reality the survivor now lives in every single day. The words can point to the wound, but they can't transmit the feeling of it.
So bridging that gap requires something more than language. It requires shared experience or just presence, something embodied.
Yes. The listener gets the narrative, but they can never fully access the context that gives that narrative its devastating present-day power.
Okay, so let's shift from the content of our experience to the structure of language itself, because it seems to have some built-in design flaws, so to speak.
Well, not flaws so much as design features for a specific purpose, and one of the biggest is intentionality. Most of the time, our words and thoughts are about something. They point to an object or concept.
I'm thinking about dinner. I'm talking about this topic. The words have a target.
Exactly. But what happens when we're in a powerful mental state that isn't about anything specific? That's the problem of non-intentional states, and it's a huge blind spot for language.
I think the clearest example from the research is free-floating anxiety.
Yes. This isn't being anxious about an upcoming exam or about paying a bill. It's just being anxious. It's a pervasive physical and mental state of dread that has no external object to point to.
Or severe clinical depression. It's often not a series of sad thoughts about specific things. It's more like the color has been drained from the entire world. It's a fundamental change in the texture of existence itself.
And language just stumbles there. It's because it's looking for that external thing to refer to. If I say, the cup is on the table, language works perfectly. If I say, my entire being feels gray, I'm trying to use this object-oriented tool to describe a subjective state of being, and it just can't get a grip.
It's like trying to take a picture of the wind. You can only capture its effects.
That's a great way to put it. And this even extends to the most basic thing of all, the simple raw feel of being conscious right now. There is something it is like to be you, but that state isn't about anything. It just is, and language has no real way to capture that.
On top of that, there's the problem of time, the temporal limit.
Right. Language is strictly linear. Words have to come out one after another in a sequence. There's no other way.
But our experience isn't like that at all. It's often simultaneous. We've all felt complex, contradictory emotions at the exact same moment.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of being intensely proud of an achievement, but at the same time, feeling a bit of shame or imposter syndrome. Or being incredibly hopeful for the future while also being terrified. Those things exist together at once.
But when you try to talk about it, you have to linearize it.
Yeah.
You have to choose which feeling to mention first and which one comes second.
And that act of choosing, of sequencing, fundamentally distorts and simplifies the reality of the inner world. It's like taking a rich, complex musical chord and being forced to play the notes one at a time. The essence of the thing is lost.
Which is why we so often have to resort to paradox when we're trying to be really honest, right? People say things like, it was the most painful experience of my life, but I've never felt more alive.
Yes. Logically, it's a contradiction. But emotionally, everyone knows exactly what that means. It's pointing to a simultaneous truth that linear language can't hold.
And this linearization messes with our memories, too. A real memory isn't a neat story.
Not at all. It's a jumble. A collage of images, sounds, smells, feelings. It's chaotic.
But when you tell someone that memory, you force it into a narrative. You give it a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're cleaning it up to make it communicable, but in the process, you're changing the very nature of how you experienced it.
And this leads to maybe the deepest constraint of all, which the sources call the embodied meaning problem. So much of what we know isn't in our heads in an abstract sense. It's in our bodies.
Do I get to taste? I can give you the full chemical analysis of a strawberry. The sugars, the acids, the aromatic compounds.
But none of that is the taste of the strawberry. That knowledge has to be, well, it has to be eaten. It's an embodied sensation, a quail. And our more abstract concepts are actually built on top of these bodily experiences.
The neuroscience on this is amazing. It shows that when you understand an abstract concept like a warm welcome, the parts of your brain that process physical heat actually light up a little bit.
Or when you say you grasp an idea, the motor cortex areas for physically grasping with your hand show a flicker of activity, meaning isn't just abstract symbols, it's grounded in our physical sensory experience of the world.
Which is why certain types of knowledge completely resist being taught through language.
Think about a dancer, a martial artist, a master carpenter. They know things with their bodies about balance, tension, rhythm, the feel of the wood that they could never fully articulate in words.
You can read 100 books about how to ride a bike, all the physics, all the theory.
But you don't know how to ride a bike until your body learns it. That knowledge is in your muscle memory, in your sense of balance. The body knows things that the conscious, verbal mind simply can't access or explain.
So we've laid out this case that the gap between words and experience is, well, it's huge. It's subjective, it's cultural, it's structural, it's embodied. And what's so interesting is how many philosophical and spiritual traditions don't see this as a flaw, but as a fundamental truth to be worked with.
Exactly. They don't try to solve the problem by creating more words. They embrace the limit, often by making a central place for silence.
You see this so clearly in Eastern thought. The sources bring up the very first line of the Tao Te Ching.
The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. It's stated right at the beginning. The ultimate reality, the fundamental nature of things, is beyond the categories that language creates. Language can describe the 10,000 things, but not the source of them.
It's a tool for the world of objects, not the world of being.
And this idea is the engine behind Zen Buddhism. The use of koans, those paradoxical riddles. Their entire purpose is to break the logical, linguistic mind. The answer can't be found in words because the inadequacy of words is the point of the lesson. You have to find the answer in a flash of direct, nonverbal insight.
And this isn't just an Eastern idea. We see parallels in Western mystical traditions, too.
Absolutely. In what's called apophatic theology, which you find in strands of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the whole approach is to describe God or the ultimate reality by saying what it is not.
Because any positive description, any word like good or powerful, is a human category that's just too small.
Yeah.
It's a very sophisticated way of saying that the ultimate transcends our linguistic frameworks. Silence becomes the most respectful form of speech.
So this all brings us back to that fundamental gap between our experience and our expression of it. Expression is always, always a reduction. It's a lower resolution copy of the original.
And we feel this most acutely in the biggest moments of our lives, trying to talk about profound grief, for instance.
The words are just so small, you say, I miss them, But that phrase is a tiny container for a gigantic, complex reality.
It doesn't capture the physical shock of expecting them to be in a room and they're not. It doesn't capture the way their absence is a constant presence. It doesn't capture the 1,000 different shades of that ache.
The words just gesture at it. They're a signpost pointing toward a territory they can never actually enter.
And the same is true for profound joy. When you're in a moment of pure, unadulterated happiness, you're not narrating it to yourself. You're just living it. The description always comes later, and it always feels like a flat black and white photo of a vibrant, colorful moment.
And what about deep intimacy between people?
Yeah.
So often the most powerful moments of connection happen in total silence. A shared look, a shared presence. Words would actually get in the way. They would complicate and reduce a feeling that is perfectly understood without them.
Or even trying to explain your own sense of purpose, why something is meaningful to you. You end up saying things like, it's just important to me. The words are placeholders because the real feeling is specific to you and resists being generalized.
So, okay, given all of this, what's the takeaway? What does this mean for you as someone trying to communicate in a world built on words? The sources point to a few really crucial shifts in thinking.
The first one feels huge. Just accepting that language is a tool, not reality itself. It's a map. And you can't confuse the map with a territory. It's designed for certain tasks like coordination and information transfer, and it's just the wrong tool for others.
And that leads to the second point, humility and compassion. When you see someone struggling to express themselves, a child having a tantrum, a partner trying to explain a feeling, our first instinct is to think they're being irrational. But what if they're just running up against the absolute limits of language?
That changes everything. It means we should react with patience, not frustration.
Third, it means we have to consciously value other ways of knowing and communicating. Art, music, dance, physical presence, working on a project together. These are not lesser forms of communication. They are parallel systems that can transmit deep meaning where words fail.
And finally,
We have to embrace the impossibility of perfect understanding. I can never fully know your inner world, and you can never fully know mine. The gap between what I mean when I say I'm sad and what you understand will always exist. And accepting that shouldn't lead to despair. It should lead to a gentler, more curious, more patient attempt to connect across that gap.
the ultimate lesson seems to be that for all its power in building our external world, there are parts of our internal world that must be lived, not told. They have to be known through direct experience.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final thought. We live now in an age of constant digital communication. We're relying more and more on abstract text, on emails, on short messages to convey our incredibly complex inner lives. We're taking that simultaneous, messy, embodied reality and forcing it through the narrowest, most linear, text-based channels we've ever had.
So the question is, how does our increasing reliance on these simplified communication tools further distort our attempts to convey who we really are? How much more does it push us into a constant state of confabulation, of presenting a neat linguistic version of ourselves that's ever more distant from the complex truth?
Knowing where words fail is a humbling realization, but in the end, it might be the most important piece of wisdom that language can give us.